The wind was a thief, and its currency was sand. It stole the breath from Evelyn Moore's lungs and scoured the tears from her cheeks before they had a chance to fall. Her white silk wedding dress, meant to symbolize her surrender, not her joy, was torn and coated in the red dust of the Arizona desert. It clung to her like a shroud, a ghostly reminder of the life she was fleeing. Each breath was a battle against the storm and against the man she had left behind, Harlon Morgan. His name tasted like ash. He wasn't a suitor. He was a land baron collecting a debt. Her father's ranch was failing, and she, 19, frightened and desperate, had become the final payment. She had seen the look in Morgan's eyes, the kind that didn't see a wife, only property. He would not be gentle. He would not be kind. He would break her as he broke his horses. So she ran. One moment she was at the altar in her father's barn, the preacher's words drowned out by the rising wind. The next, she had gathered her skirts and bolted through the side door into the storm. Shouts followed, but the wind swallowed them whole. She had no plan, only the raw instinct to escape. Her world had been no larger than her father's land, a place of dust and drought. Beyond that lay only stories and maps. The storm grew wild, painting the sky in red and brown. The sun disappeared, choked out by dust. Evelyn pressed on, her lungs burning, her legs shaking. The desert was merciless. Then, through the storm's roar, a deeper rumble rolled thunder. Lightning flashed, revealing a wasteland of jagged rocks and thorny mesquite trees. The rain came fast, soaking her silk gown until it clung heavy and cold. Her body trembled from exhaustion. She would die out here. If the cold didn't take her, the coyotes would. Just when the last flicker of hope began to fade, she saw it. A light. Faint, golden, and flickering through the sheets of rain. It could be anyone. A stranger. A savior. Or worse, Morgan's men. But the choice was simple. Face death in the storm, or chase that light. She stumbled toward it. It was a small cabin, half hidden against a rocky rise, smoke curling from its chimney. Beside it stood a darker structure, maybe a workshop or stable. The light glowed through one grimy window. Evelyn knocked weakly on the rough wooden door. The wind howled louder than her voice. No answer. Shivering and desperate, she tried the latch. It opened. Warmth hit her first, thick, humid air that smelled of wood smoke, hot metal, and something faintly clean, like pine soap. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The room was dim, lit only by the dying glow of embers in a stone fireplace. Shadows danced across the walls, revealing a small, spare space, a narrow cot, a table, a silent anvil, and a forge built into the hearth. It was a blacksmith's home. Then she saw it. In the center of the room, a large wooden bathtub, steam rising from its surface. Someone had been bathing. Or still was. Evelyn froze. Terror gripped her chest. She turned to flee, but her numb feet tangled in the edge of a bearskin rug. She stumbled forward, not onto the hard floor, but into the steaming water. The impact was chaos. Heat, splashing, the cling of wet fabric, and the solid, unmistakable weight of another body beneath her. For a moment, only the storm outside dared to move. Evelyn gasped, submerged to her waist, sprawled across the lap of a man she hadn't seen until now. The soaked silk clung to her body, every line visible. Her heart stopped. She raised her head slowly. The firelight revealed him, broad-shouldered, bare-chested, his wet dark hair slicked back, his eyes locked on hers. They were deep, unreadable gray, like a storm held still. His face was all hard angles marked by age and solitude, framed by a short, rough beard. He wasn't old, perhaps 30, but his eyes carried more years than his skin. He didn't shout, he didn't move, he just stared, stunned into stillness. Evelyn could barely breathe. She scrambled to stand, but her dress tangled around her legs. She slipped again, splashing water everywhere. Shame flooded her. Hot, suffocating, paralyzing. I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice shaking. "The storm, I tripped." The man still said nothing. His silence was heavier than a shout. Then, with calm strength, he rose from the tub, water streaming from his muscular frame. He turned his back to her, grabbing a towel from a peg and wrapping it around his waist. The gesture, so simple, carried a quiet decency that cut through her panic. "Get out before you catch a chill," he said finally, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. Evelyn obeyed, climbing from the tub, dripping and trembling. Her ruined gown clung to her like a second skin. He turned away, keeping his gaze on the fire. She took the wool blanket he offered and wrapped it tightly around herself. It smelled of smoke, metal, and him. He stoked the fire until flames bloomed again, casting steady light across the cabin. He didn't ask who she was. He didn't demand an explanation. He just pointed to the chair near the hearth. "Sit, get warm." She did, curling into the blanket. He pulled on work trousers and a shirt, then moved to the window, peering out into the storm like a sentry. The fire crackled, rain hammered the roof, and exhaustion crept over her. Her eyelids grew heavy. When she finally drifted to sleep, he was still standing there. The silent blacksmith she had fallen upon like a ghost, guarding her from the wild, merciless night. Morning came with a deep, metallic clang. Evelyn stirred, blinking in the sunlight spilling through the window. The storm was gone. The air smelled of rain and earth. She heard another clang, steady and powerful. Outside, the blacksmith was at work, bare-chested again, his back to her. The muscles in his shoulders rippled with each swing of his hammer. Sparks flew with every strike, scattering gold against the gray morning. He was strength, and solitude made flesh. She couldn't look away. He paused only long enough to dip the glowing metal into water, sending up a hiss of steam. Then he turned, and their eyes met again. "There's coffee on the fire," he said, "and bread on the table." Then he turned back to his forge, the hammer rising once more. Inside, Evelyn stood silent, staring at the loaf of dark bread and tin of coffee on the hearth. Her stomach knotted with hunger and gratitude. She had found shelter, safety, and something she couldn't name yet. But she also knew the truth. Harlon Morgan would not let her go so easily. And when he came looking, the storm outside would be nothing compared to the one about to come. For the next few days, a strange rhythm settled over the small clearing by the forge. Evelyn woke to the sound of the hammer, that deep, steady heartbeat of metal and fire. Jack Callahan, as she learned from a note carved above the door, spoke little, but his silence was not cruel. It was steady, like the land itself. She cleaned the cabin out of habit, sweeping the floor, washing the tin dishes, folding the wool blanket that had saved her life. She needed to be useful. She could not simply exist like a ghost haunting his home. And though he never said it, Jack noticed. The way she folded his shirts, the way the air felt cleaner with her in it. When she hung her ruined wedding dress outside to dry, he paused mid-swing, his gray eyes flickering toward it. That tattered white silk told him more than any confession could. She had run from something terrible. He didn't ask, he didn't need to. By evening, the storm's memory had faded, replaced by a new quiet, a peace she had never known. That peace lasted exactly 1 week. One morning, Jack broke it without lifting his eyes from the glowing iron on his anvil. "We need flour," he said, "and salt." He quenched the metal, steam hissing. "I can't go into Red Hollow. They still watch me." The words hung heavy between them. Evelyn froze. Red Hollow. The town she'd fled from. The place ruled by Harlon Morgan's shadow. Her voice trembled. "I'll go." Jack looked up, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he nodded. "Be careful." He dressed her in a loose linen shirt, worn dungarees, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed her face. Her long, honey-colored hair was tied back beneath it. When he handed her a small pouch of coins, his rough fingers brushed hers, and a spark of something unspoken passed between them. She left at dawn, walking the dry arroyo that led to town. Each step tightened the knot of fear in her stomach. Red Hollow was the same, dusty, suspicious, and mean. She kept her head low as she entered Miller's Mercantile. She took what she needed and paid quickly. The old man barely looked up, but someone else did. "Well, I'll be," came a sly voice from behind. "Ain't this one of the Moore girls?" Her blood ran cold. Silas Croft, a rancher and Harlon Morgan's drinking companion. His small eyes gleamed with recognition. "Thought you'd run out of the territory," he said, grinning. "Mr. Morgan's been offering a fine reward for anyone who finds you." Evelyn didn't answer. She pushed through the door, her heart pounding, her feet carrying her fast down the street. She didn't stop until the town disappeared behind her. By the time she reached the clearing, her breath came in ragged gasps. Jack was sharpening an axe. One look at her face and he knew. "Someone saw you," he said quietly. She nodded. "Silas Croft, he knows. He mentioned a reward." Jack's expression hardened. He set the axe down slowly, staring toward the horizon. "Then Morgan will come." That night, the air in the cabin grew thick. The fire burned low, the wind restless outside. They sat in silence, both listening for a sound they didn't want to hear. Finally, Evelyn spoke. Her voice was soft, but sharp. "Why don't you leave? You could be gone before they find you. I'm the one they want." Jack looked into the fire, his gray eyes reflecting the flames. "Running doesn't solve anything. It just changes the scenery." For the first time since she'd met him, he kept talking. "They call me a killer," he said. "The story they tell in town, it's half true." Evelyn froze. "I killed a man," he continued, voice low and even. "My lieutenant. We were trapped by Apaches. He was gut-shot. He begged me not to let them take him alive, so I didn't. The army found me sitting beside him. They saw a dead officer and a living private. They called it murder." Quote. He stopped, his jaw tight. The fire popped softly. "But that wasn't why I left," he said. "While I was gone fighting for a country that didn't care, my wife was killed." Evelyn's breath caught. "Your wife?" "Her name was Sarah," he said quietly. "She stood up to a group of patrolmen who came through our land. They struck her down, hit her head on the hearth. When I came home, there was nothing left but an empty house and a grave. The law called it an accident." His eyes lifted to hers, hollow, haunted. "That's when I learned what justice really means out here. You take what peace you can find and you hold it." In the silence that followed, Evelyn felt her throat tighten. The man everyone feared, the rumored killer, was broken by the same cruel world that had sold her to Harlon Morgan. "They didn't see you," she whispered. "They saw what they wanted." He looked at her for a long moment. Between them, something shifted. The wall of silence that had kept them apart began to crack. The next morning, he placed a gun in her hands. "A Colt Peacemaker, its steel gleaming in the sun. You'll need to know how to use it," he said, "if they come." He taught her to aim, to breathe, to steady her hand. Her first shot went wide, kicking up dust near the fence post. "Again," was all he said. By the third day, her aim was true. He nodded once, the faintest hint of pride in his eyes. She spent her afternoons by the stable, tending to his injured horse, a black mare named Mercy. Her leg had been caught in a rock slide. Jack showed her how to clean the wound and wrap it. Evelyn's touch was gentle, her voice soothing. The horse began to heal under her care, and so, in a way, did she. As the days passed, she noticed the world around them softening. Mercy's limp faded. Jack's eyes grew calmer. Even the air in the cabin seemed lighter. Then, one afternoon, while sweeping the cabin, Evelyn found a small patch of wild lavender near the rocks behind the forge. She plucked a sprig and brought it inside. She placed it carefully on the edge of the wooden tub, the same tub she had fallen into. That evening, Jack entered, weary and soot-streaked. He stopped when he saw it, the small purple sprig resting on the tub's rim. For a long time, he said nothing. His broad shoulders stiffened, his eyes unreadable. Evelyn's heart pounded. She had overstepped. But then, instead of brushing it away, he touched it. gently, with the rough pads of his fingers, and left it there. He said nothing that night, but for the first time, when their eyes met across the firelight, there was warmth in his gaze. Outside, coyotes called in the dark. Inside, the cabin smelled of smoke, steel, and the faint, sweet scent of lavender. Neither spoke of it, but they both felt the same quiet truth. Something had changed between them forever. The fragile peace scented with lavender lasted a week. Then, one night, the desert fell silent. The kind of silence that meant danger. Jack's hammer had stopped hours ago. The fire in the forge was low. Evelyn was mending a torn flour sack by the hearth when every sound outside vanished at once. The crickets, the wind, even the coyotes. It was the stillness before violence. Jack's head snapped up. He blew out the oil lamp, plunging the room into darkness. "Down," he whispered. She obeyed. Crouching behind the table, a faint light flickered outside, torches moving slowly through the trees. Then came a voice, loud and venomous. "Callahan! I know you're in there. I've come for what's mine." Harlon Morgan. The name alone froze Evelyn's blood. Jack stayed silent, rifle ready, his eyes cold as stone. "Send out the girl," Morgan shouted, "and I might let you live." The world outside exploded in orange. One of the torches flew through the air, landing on the workshop roof. Flames roared upward, devouring wood and sky. Smoke poured toward the cabin, choking the air. Jack made his choice in an instant. "Stay here," he ordered. Before she could protest, he kicked open the door and disappeared into the chaos. Gunfire split the night, the crack of rifles, the thunder of hooves. Men shouting. Evelyn pressed her hands to her ears, heart hammering, every second an eternity. She forced herself to look. Through the smoke and flame, she saw him, a shadow moving with deadly grace, firing, reloading, ducking behind the stone. Well, he was outnumbered but not outmatched. Two of Morgan's men went down in the dirt. Then she saw Morgan himself, calm behind a horse, aiming carefully. A flash. A gunshot. Jack stumbled, his rifle falling. He dropped to one knee, clutching his side. "Jack!" Evelyn screamed. The world slowed. Morgan and his man advanced, guns raised. Something inside her broke loose. Not fear, but fury. She pulled the Colt from her belt, her hands shaking. She remembered his words. "Breathe, squeeze, don't jerk." She aimed, not at Morgan, but at the lantern hanging near the well. She fired. The lantern shattered, plunging the yard into sudden blackness. Morgan cursed. His men spun toward the noise. Jack, wounded but alive, seized the chance. He lunged for her, grabbed her arm, and pulled her into the dark behind the cabin. "Run!" he gasped. They stumbled toward the stable, where Mercy was screaming and pulling at her tether. Jack vaulted onto the mare's bare back, his jaw clenched against the pain. He reached down and pulled Evelyn up in front of him. "Go!" Mercy bolted into the night, hooves pounding against the wet ground, sparks flying from the stones. Behind them, fire lit the sky, Morgan's rage echoing in curses and gunshots. They rode until the earth turned to shadow and exhaustion blurred everything. Finally, under a high ridge of red rock, Jack's strength gave out. "In there," he rasped, pointing toward a narrow cave hidden by brush. Evelyn helped him down. He collapsed onto the cold sand, his breath shallow, his side soaked in blood. She tore fabric from her shirt and his, binding the wound as best she could. The bleeding slowed, but the fever came fast. His skin turned hot, his body shivering. In his delirium he spoke to ghosts. "Hold the line, Sarah, check the well." His words broke into half-formed pleas. Evelyn froze when she heard the name Sarah, the wife he had lost. Her chest tightened, a sharp ache of pity and something else. Jealousy of a ghost she could never match. But she wouldn't let him die, not after everything. She found his small leather satchel and inside, a worn Bible with the name Sarah Callahan written inside the cover. She opened it at random, her trembling voice filling the cave. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures." Her voice wavered, but she kept reading, verse after verse, hour after hour. It was all she had. Words to fight the darkness closing in. When his fever reached its peak, he stopped breathing for one terrible moment. Evelyn pressed the lavender-scented cloth to his face, sobbing, "Stay with me, Jack. Please stay." Then, slowly, he shuddered. A breath, then another. The fever broke with the dawn. When he finally opened his eyes, she was slumped beside him, her hand resting on his chest. He looked at her, pale, exhausted, but alive. "You heard me," he said hoarsely. "I heard a man in pain," she whispered. "A man who loved deeply, a man who didn't deserve what this world gave him." He tried to look away, ashamed, but she held his gaze. "You're not what they say you are. You're the man who saved me." The morning light cut through the cave's crack like a blade of gold. It fell across their faces. A quiet benediction. They didn't speak again. They didn't need to. The world outside had burned, but inside that cave, something new had been forged. Fragile, but real. Weeks later, a traveling preacher brought word Harlon Morgan was dead, killed in a drunken fight by one of his own men. When they returned to Red Hollow, the forge was nothing but ash. The cabin still stood. Jack looked at the ruins and said simply, "I'll need an axe." They rebuilt together, beam by beam, sweat by sweat. She sewed curtains, he raised walls. The sound of his hammer became the new rhythm of the town, a sound of life, not loneliness. People began to come again, men needing tools, women bringing torn clothes for Evelyn to mend. Slowly, quietly, the town that once whispered about them began to rely on them. Months later, one evening, after the forge fire had cooled, Evelyn filled the wooden tub again. Steam rose softly. She laid out a towel and placed a single sprig of lavender on the rim. When Jack entered, tired and covered in soot, he stopped. Their eyes met, and he understood. He stepped into the bath, sinking into the heat with a sigh. She turned away, smiling. When he opened his eyes again, the lavender scent filled the air. "That scent," he murmured. "I found it once. I'll never lose it again." He wasn't talking about the flower. He was talking about her. They had been strangers bound by accident, but now they were something deeper. Two broken souls who had chosen each other. That night, the desert was quiet. The hammer at the forge was still. The air was full of the faint, sweet scent of lavender and the promise of forever.